I figured out how to automatically assign projects for a 60-person writing agency. Now, this company had 3 project managers that were doing this manually. They were convinced it had to be done manually, but with a few simple high school math equations, I was able to automate this process entirely. They're still using this multiple years later, I think 3 years later after I implemented this. So in this video, I'm going to teach you how it works, how you can implement it in your business, give you a little demonstration of the code, and by the end of it, you'll know how to automate things in your business that basically nobody in the world knows how to do. Regardless of your type of business, I'm sure this will work for you. It's worked before with a bunch of different people. So let's get into it. Why your process needs math. Number 1 is learning your preferences is extremely slow and expensive to hire for. 2 is decision fatigue. Your team will get stressed if they have to make too many computations, and eventually they will turn over sooner than they would have otherwise. It leads to inconsistent decisions between team members. Everybody prioritizes things a little bit differently. And if you want quality and also speed and also to save your team's mental bandwidth for more important things, this is super important. And so ultimately the goal is to remove thinking, which increases your capacity, and speed, which makes you more money. So should you use AI? Isn't this an AI thing, a GPT, whatever? There's a couple of problems with AI specifically for this application. Number 1 is that the outputs change all the time, and you don't want your process to like suddenly change without your knowledge. You cannot make really fine adjustments to preferences in the same way that I'm going to show you with this method. And it's also, if you have hundreds of API calls per day, it can be expensive as well to actually run this. So workload distribution and like lead scoring and all these kind of things, they seem like they need AI, but you'll actually get better results if you don't use it, if you just use like high school math equations. Okay, so we talked about why not use AI. Let's talk about physics and business here for a second. So physics, how material things move in the world, is very similar to decision making. So imagine you have 2 cars and they're traveling at different speeds. The one who's going faster will just go further. Okay, like it will win the race, which seems stupid and redundant to even mention that, but the same thing is true for decision making. So if 2 freelancers have varying quality, give the project to the one who is better quality. Give the project to the one who's faster, whatever it is. Okay, so a decision is the same as physics. Okay, every single behavior, even if that behavior seems like subjective or seems like a judgment call, it can just be broken up into different logical parts. So for example, okay, consider physics for a second. If I'm in a car driving this way and I throw this ball at a certain angle, I can figure out how far it'll go, what direction it'll go, right? Because I know the car, I know the ball weight and, size and whatever else. I know the air friction, whatever else. The same thing is true with a business decision, okay? So every single subjective decision, like which closer gets the lead, which candidate gets the recommended for the job, how much should we offer for the property, etc. Those things are just composed of logical parts. That means all you have to do, if you want to fully automate this, is find the different math equations and measure the individual parts, combine them together, and make sure they're ranking the overall combination works and is matches what you want. That's it. Okay, and then you can just add. You compute the score, and then you add to automation. That's literally it. So we talked about physics and business. There's some insane and I think like unappreciated advantages of doing this. So the first one is that, okay, every factor in the equation is a fact. Okay, so you could say, like which freelancer gets the project is a subjective judgment call, but how late on average each freelancer was in the last 30 days, how many projects they completed in the last 30 days, the average number of mistakes they make and the severity of those mistakes, like these are all just facts. Okay. So the equation is the one that prioritizes between the facts to say, okay, well, I like this set of facts better than this set of facts, which means you can have consistency with your team because no one can argue the facts. No one can argue, well, this person submitted this project at 12:01 p.m. and it was due at 5 p.m. Like, they can't argue that. And so you start to standardize and make your decision-making process consistent with your entire team. Very cool. The second thing is that if you have a team paid on performance, which probably most people do for things like this, the only way for them to get more work and therefore more money is to change their behavior so they're doing the things you want them to do. So if you have freelancers or salespeople if you have a salesperson that gets a lead based on how much they're liked by the sales manager, the way they get more leads is to suck up to the sales manager and create extra communication in your business to try to ask for things, right? So it's extra admin work. It slows your entire business down. Whereas if the only way for the salesperson to get more leads is to close more deals and to collect more cash, then they have to do the thing that you want them to do anyway. So you can align what you want them to do with how they get more work and automate that entirely, which means that your business becomes self-correcting. And this also results across the board in lower stress and burnout, and of course, more mental energy for other tasks. So then the other cool thing is you get cheap labor. Okay. So the type of diligent person that you would need to be able to think very fast and to also model your decision-making, it's a very expensive person and would take a long time for them to be trained. Whereas you can get this with either cheap labor or with automation entirely. And so your business becomes cheaper to run. Okay. So we talked about insane advantages. Let's talk about how to implement this without a team mutiny. So number one, what you want to do is, for the decision you want to make, gather factors for what this should be based on. So if it's, which salesperson gets the lead, you might say, well, who's just collected the most cash? Okay. That might be the only metric. You might also consider things like how far out is this person's calendar booked, things like that. But you want to gather the factors individually, make sure that you have them as true. So cash collected last week, cash collected in the last 15 days, whatever it is. I suggest that all of these are time sensitive, because you want this to auto adjust as time goes on. If people are amazing, they start to suck, and then they get amazing again, you want the calculation to dynamically, kind of adjust over time. Okay. Second thing, paired KPIs, super important. So for example, we had a case where there was one person on a team who was objectively was the most late. And I was like, hey, this guy, Jason, he's always late. And, we should rank him the lowest. But the project managers, the people were like, whoa, you don't understand. What actually happens is we give him projects really, really late. We give him very big projects, and we give him things that he has almost he just gets loaded with work. And so I created a paired KPI. So rather than number of projects submitted late, it was a lateness factor or score based on how large the project was and how soon before the deadline it was submitted late, it was assigned, and how late it was. So something submitted 5 minutes late that he had 24 hours to do, and it was a huge project, was ranked very differently than if somebody had 2 weeks to do something and it was a very easy project, so that it was a paired KPI. So you want to make sure after you gather factors individually that you validate each one, and you may have to do paired KPIs for that. Okay, for example, this. The third thing is to create a list of live data and ranking. So we use Airtable for this, but you can use any kind of spreadsheet software, whatever else, a database software. So what you want to do is rank your team, have a live ranking of the entire list, and have everyone look at that list. Okay, you want to get live data and really show it so that you can see if it's accurate or not. You're going to have people that disagree with you. Okay, so you need to decide at that point, or determine if it's because you're missing a factor, you need to create a pair KPI, or people just are having a hard time adjusting to this whole idea, and they're used to making decisions in a slightly different way. Okay, so this could be a change management thing. It could be a technology thing. Then you add to automation. So you have to get agreement on the team amongst your team about how we make decisions as a group. And then you add to the automation. And then what you do is you allow for overrides. So we were doing like an email to assign the project, but rather than sending the email automatically, we were doing a draft email. Now, if you have a very, very time sensitive process, you may have to actually just override it and like let it rip and test later. But if you're able to, at least what we did is we allowed for overrides and we measured whether it was overridden or not to try to figure out if we had an adoption issue or something was inaccurate. So that is the last step of this process. So we talked about that. Let's get into a code example. I'll show you exactly how this actually works in the real world. This code looks really complicated. This is the onboarding automation. And the most interesting thing about this for our purposes is the set topic and get auto suggest writer. So the way this works is we first have to figure out the topic. If you have a video agency or a creative agency, you might find people are specialists in fashion or in history or in economics or certain niches. So we want to figure out the niche. Certain niches for this client can be done by anybody, and certain other niches must be done by a specialist in that niche, depending on how complicated it is. So we have a configuration that does this. And so the first thing we do is kind of eliminate the list of writers that are inappropriate for the niche based on the niche. We have to do the niche first, and then we get the auto suggest writer. So the classification of topic, this is kind of specific to content agencies. So the next thing is auto suggesting a writer. The first thing we do is we determine how easy the project is, how soon it's due, and how sophisticated or complex it is. And the reason we do that is because if it's a very difficult project, we want that to go to only the most experienced writers. But if it's a very easy project and there's a new person available that needs to be trained, we have to shift that project to a new person because we want them to get ramped up and trained as quickly as possible to then become part of the experienced group. So there's actually the 3 different writing levels. There's the noobs, the kind of mid-tier people, and then the pros, and they're treated differently based on their performance. They're ranked basically based on their performance differently. And so we do that here. But really all this scenario is doing is, are there newbies, get writer. All this scenario is doing is grabbing 1 record or 5 records from Airtable, ranking by the auto suggest score. That's all it's doing here. So most of the heavy lifting for this is done in a formula, and all this equation or this automation is doing is figuring out the writer level and then saying, give me 1 or give me 5 people. So it gets 1 if there's a person available, and if there's nobody available that we think has the capacity to take on the project, then it gets the 5 highest ranked, even if we think they're not available, and the writers themselves kind of determine who will take the project. So that's how that works. The really interesting formulas that I was talking about happen in Airtable. The make automation is just grabbing the first record from Airtable. That's all it is. And so we're using this auto suggest priority score to rank the team. And all a writer has to do to get more projects is to do better. So they have to make fewer quality mistakes. They have to say yes to projects. They have to be on time when they submit. And we're also using a formula to estimate their maximum capacity. So this looks really complicated, but as I talked about in the video, it's just a subjective thing or a subjective sounding thing that's just broken down into logical parts. Now, to do any of this, you have to have your business process mapped properly and have everything in a data structure. And so the way to do that is to use Airtable. I recorded a complete tutorial on that right here.